For some of you, you may be interested in this because you want to be prepared yourself to be working directly with youth, and some of you are going to be training others and looking for resources to help you in training them. And so either of those options, we hope today will meet your needs. And if you have any questions or we're not quite giving you what you're looking for in the webinar, please let us know in the chat at any point. We appreciate your interaction that way, and at different places, we'll also invite you to join in the conversation. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Sandra Frerichs. I'm a STEM specialist with Nebraska 4-H and part of the Click to Science team. This is the work that we do to support out-of-school time programming in STEM, and today we're specifically focusing on computer science and our Click to Computer Science website. We really think that STEM is important in preparing young people for their future, and computer science in particular is something that all learners deserve the opportunity to have those sort of learning experiences. So we're here to support you in doing that. Anne, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hello, my name is Ann O'Connor, and I'm the project manager for the Click to Science project, and I'm also with Nebraska 4-H. And my background is in formal education as a science and history teacher, but I've been working in informal education for the past 9 years. And I really enjoy the opportunities that out of school time offers, because you can be a little more flexible with some things, and you can do activities that maybe the kids are really interested in, where you did not have that. I didn't have that flexibility as a formal educator. And it's also really interesting to see how the kids get excited about different things, because we can bring new topics in that they maybe don't get to cover in school. So that's the things I really enjoy about informal education. Love computer science, did a 4-year grant on it that was really interesting. Kids really enjoy that. Before we get started, there are a few things that you will want to have handy for this workshop. It's recommended that you have a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper to write, because we will give you things in the chat both, as well as links and resources as well if you want to jot them down. And it might be helpful for you to download the chat at the end. If you don't know how to do that, we can show you how to do that. And we will also be using the handouts that you received in an email from Sandra earlier this week. And we also just put in the links in the chat with the Makey activity and the checklist for quality activities. We'll be using those later on in the webinar.
And depending on your learning preference, you might want to have a printout, or you might just want to look at those on your computer screen. It should work either way to use them electronically or in a print format. We know that all young people need to understand computational thinking and computer science, because it's so embedded in everything we do in the world today, in what we do for our work, and what we do in our free time. So we really think that that is important for all students to have those experiences. And today's webinar will focus on an effective process for preparing to lead computer science activities. We're talking specifically about computer science, but there's really nothing about this particular process that is specific to computer science. It's about preparing to lead in out of school time. But we're also going to talk about adapting resources to meet the needs of your learners and integrating computer science into the programming that you offer, and hopefully in a way that makes it accessible for all students, not just a select few. We're also going to have some time to practice this process as we're going. We're going to be using the Makey piano activity as a sample activity, and really think about what does that process look like as you're preparing. We really are lifting this up as best practices in terms of what happens in out of school time. But we're going to wrap up with a discussion about the challenges that programs face in implementing this sort of practice of taking time ahead of time to prepare to teach, and what other people are seeing. We see that's challenging today and want to take some time to talk about that and needs the programs have.
All right, and we
Now
want
we'd like to, go ahead, Ann.
now we wanted to just give you the opportunity to introduce yourself now that we've done that. So you can do so in chat, or you are welcome to unmute and just talk. And one of the things that we were interested in knowing is, why are you interested in today's workshop? If you want to put that in chat or unmute. And then, where are you from? If you can share your location or the organization you work for, we thought that would be helpful, just to kind of give us an idea of who's attending. So if you want to unmute, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, you can type it in the chat.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm from Leffler Middle School at Lincoln. I am a SCC here in the after school program. So I'm really interested on this workshop because I think that the students also are looking for, different things and how we can apply the STEM classes into the after school program. I think that is something that kids really like, and and it's a good way to also engage new kids in my program. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
All right, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Courtney Shuley, and I love all of the excuses to hang out with the wonderful staff here with Click to Engineering and Click to Science. So anytime I see it, I just register and then I read about it later because I just love all the things that you guys provide. However, realistically, I thought I just love being able to provide different opportunities for our coordinators, and we have a quarterly meeting coming up next week. So I just wanted to be able to share something new and exciting, or another way that they can use something that they maybe already have. I come to you from North Dakota. I'm the student services specialist at a regional education association, but I'm here because I play a big role in supporting our 21st century programs region-wide. We have 14 sites.
All right, thank you, Courtney.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kim Turnbull. I'm actually from Illinois. I work for ACT Now, and I'm the after-school STEM specialist. So I supply resources across the state in STEM to all of our different, to any out-of-school time program. I was really interested in today because one of my focuses for the upcoming fiscal year is going to be computer science and technology. And so I'm going to be responsible to train facilitators as well as do other trainings to get them comfortable to do computer science and coding and technology-based activities in their programs.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you very much. And Amanda, did you want to unmute? Oh, yep, you got your in chat. So Amanda, you can read it in chat. And I think we are ready. That's everybody. So we're ready to move on to the rest of the content, Sandra.
Okay, sorry, I am losing my place with my trying to share the screen. Okay. My mouse is moving from one place to another on my two screens and getting lost in between. So as I said, we're going to talk about this process. We just have 4 steps to help after school programs in particular, or any out of school time program, as they're facilitating STEM activities. The first step is finding good and inexpensive activities. We know that's a challenge for a lot of people. And we have a blog on our website about finding good activities that links a lot of different places where you may find the activities that are good quality STEM activities. But we also wanted to do some brainstorming in the chat, and this is one of the reasons we thought you might want to save the chat later. Do you have favorite places specifically for finding computer science activities? There are a lot of them out there, but if you're not familiar with the sites, you may have trouble. So where do people go to look for computer science? Anybody have favorite sites? Creative computing, I like that one, and Scratch. Coding with Google, Kim, is that CS first?
Yes, it is.
Okay. See if I can copy some links into the URL. Some URL links into the chat for some of those sites that we're mentioning. And you want to talk about Clover a minute?
Sure. One of the pretty new sites that you may not have heard of, it's called Clover by 4-H. It was launched actually last June, and it was originally designed during COVID for students that were working from home that needed activities. They have since relaunched it so that it is now activities that you can do with small groups of students, or you could potentially adapt those to full classrooms. And they have all kinds of topics in there, and they're adding more all the time. They're written by extension specialists and extension educators all over the country. They are actually vetted so that they are not, you can't just post anything you want to on there. It goes through a process, and those are all free. You just have to sign up for the website itself, and then you can go and access those activities. And one of the areas they have is computer science. And when they get everything up, there'll be 45 different activities in computer science, ranging from unplugged activities all the way through to, they call them advanced activities, which would be Python coding, those types of activities. And you can do them in any order. You just go pull them off, and they have some tips and guidelines for teaching them as well. And I think there's supply lists on the activities. They give you the timelines. So they're pretty much ready to go if you are interested in doing that. They also have them for science and a lot of other areas as well.
So Clover is one that people may not be aware of, so we wanted to share that. One of the nice things about Clover too is a lot of the activities are written for students to learn on their own as well, so they can kind of go through it themselves. It may be another way to make things accessible for students that don't necessarily have somebody who feels comfortable teaching them about computer science. They can explore Clover on their own and learn more about it. How to Smile is similar to Clover in that it's a collection of activities that have been vetted. A lot of the How to Smile activities are designed by museums or libraries or other informal teaching institutions. So it's another great place to find activities. How to Smile is more aimed at group learning, classroom, and after school. Clover is really ideal for students to learn on their own, but there's also lots of great opportunities to find activities to lead with kids on Clover. Does anybody else want to talk about any of the resources that they shared that they think would be really beneficial to the group? We really feel like this sort of connecting and networking is useful.
So I've used Scratch, which is a very simple coding platform. And there's just so many options that you can do, from, creating your own little sprite, making a story, but also creating games and other computer related items. It doesn't talk about some of the other, or it doesn't include some of the other aspects of computer science, like data collection and things, but it is a really good coding program.
One of the things I really like about Scratch is they've got a lot of tutorials built in. So again, the person who's leading the activity doesn't have to know how to do all the steps in Scratch, but they can help the students and facilitate that learning on their own. I think that's a real strength for Scratch. Well, I think we have a good variety of resources to go to find some good quality CS activities. And I appreciate everyone sharing. I noticed that we didn't have any Pinterest sites. I know that is a place where a lot of after-school staff do go to find CS activities, and there are some really good, it is possible to find really high quality activities if you have the right boards that you're following on Pinterest, but it's also easy to find a lot of activities that aren't necessarily high quality. And that's where step 2 comes in, of really assessing the activity, looking for those pieces or components that may be missing, because sometimes you don't have to throw out an activity because it's missing some of these components, but you may have to add something into it. In 4-H, and Ann and I both work for 4-H, we're really focused on youth development, and we use STEM as a way to help kids reach their full capacity, capabilities in the world, to develop into whole, well-rounded people. But learning the STEM in and of itself is not necessarily our primary goal, but learning how to communicate, how to bounce trade-offs, how to work cooperatively, all of those things may be just as important to us as the STEM outcomes, developing your identity and your sense of self. So sometimes there's pieces that we'll add to an activity, like a Scratch activity where they're creating a sprite and maybe telling a little story with their sprite. We might add a discussion at the end that's debriefing about what were you trying to communicate, and how does Scratch help you communicate, to really emphasize that whole person aspect of the learning experience. So the checklist, and we're gonna spend some time actually working with this checklist later, but it is designed to help you identify those areas. And I just realized that this was supposed to be your slide to talk on, and I just started talking. Do you want to add anything now that I've talked about the checklist for 5 minutes?
No, I think that was, you did a really nice summary of it. And we know that one of the challenges in some of your programs may be that you have people coming in 15 minutes before they're supposed to start. If you have a paraeducator, they're coming from school directly, so they don't have time to necessarily do this. And so one of the things that I'm interested in hearing later is it feasible to use this quality checklist, or can somebody at least do this so that you have the process that you go through to think about the activities, because you can put any activity into an after school program, but it's not necessarily good. And so you want the ones that are going to be highly effective. And so this checklist we designed to make it as easy as possible, but to get the main points in that you need to have. And there are a lot of computer science activities out there. They are not all good. So this is just to help you hopefully go through it very quickly and figure out, okay, is this an activity I want to use? And if it is, what adjustments do I need to make it even better? Because you can always improve an activity. That's one of the things we learned as teacher. You can always improve it. It's whether you have the time and the resources to do so. So that would be all I would add to that. And so next step 3 is preparing yourself, and Sandra's going to explain that one.
Okay. So once you've found an activity and you've kind of looked at it and assessed whether there's all the elements that are important to your program are there, whether there's anything you need to do to enhance or improve that activity, the next step is to take time to prepare yourself. And to do this one, I'm actually going to share one of the videos from the Click to Computer Science website as a resource that where we'll hear some educators talking about preparing themselves to facilitate STEM learning. Sorry, I need to get to the right window.
And while Sandra is doing that, I'll put the link into the chat. And she might already have done, which is to the video. So if we get disconnected or something, you have the link, or if you want to use it, you are welcome to do so as well.
Sorry, I changed to find the links earlier and I closed down the link I need. Now we're ready. Sorry about that.
You have to prepare for these classes. And if you don't know a question or something doesn't go exactly as planned, don't panic. Just go through the process again. If you've prepared correctly, you should have the right process. And just try it over again.
Teaching STEM requires thoughtful planning and strategic preparation of materials. It might also require some brushing up on STEM content knowledge. Listen as these experienced instructors describe what they do to prepare for STEM learning with youth.
What I try to do is make sure that I brush up on all the concepts that I teach them before I even think about creating a lesson plan. I make sure that I'm completely aware of everything that I'm trying to communicate to them, because questions arise on the spot and you usually don't plan for them. So I always make sure that I'm well studied on any concept that I teach the kids. And then I take the time to understand the concept through their perspective.
Is our weight the same here as it is on the moon? No. No. Is our mass the same? Yes. We serve a variety of different communities, specifically here in the DC metro area. Sessions will look different depending on the group of learners. Youth voice, making sure that the activities that we select aren't just cookie cutter type activities, that they're able to be molded to the different groups. Because some learners have more visual styles that they respond to. Some learners are more auditory. Some learners like to automatically get hands-on and get physical. So depending on the group, we generally try to tailor our activity to make sure that it's fitting their learning style.
Here's your box. If I put the ball here.
The setup of the room is crucial. It really is most impactful when you're able to have all of the learners facing you as the instructor. So you don't have to move around too much to get everybody's attention. You can kind of reel everybody back in. The activities that specifically focus on engineering involve a lot of group work. So we try to position everyone where they're able to work in a group, but still be central enough that they can hear, they can have all their materials right in one spot, and they can interact with each other without feeling like they're in school. I think that's one of the important things, is to figure out a configuration that works for you as an instructor, but gives them the freedom to feel like, okay, this is fun, this is just an activity that we're doing, but still gives them that structure that they need to accomplish the goal. One time, that's the end of the class. Hope you have fun. When you have an activity that involves a lot of materials, you want to make sure that all of the materials are easily accessible. I like to give the learners a job or a way to be involved in the session. So for example, if we have to pass out tape for the lesson, I'll say, okay, which one of my leaders is going to help me pass out tape today? Making them feel empowered, again, is an important part of the setup, and mentally preparing them. I think that's a big component as well. On your table, you should already have about 10 inches of tape. This isn't just any tape. This is space tape. Yes.
What did you notice in the videos? What steps were Alex and Lamont talking about doing to prepare?
Well, one thing is first knowing the subject. So before you try to get in front of a group of kids, make sure you know the background information and anticipate any problems that kind of might come around.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Alex said. I think that's really important to try, especially if you can try out the activity ahead of time to kind of know what's going to happen. But he also said he tries to make sure he knows everything about it. And I am not able to do that anymore. I have to be honest. Sometimes I walk into the classroom not necessarily knowing everything about the concept that I'm teaching. So I think there's also room to kind of be learning along with the students and have some strategies in mind to, well, how can we figure that out if they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to? So I think there's this real balancing between preparing and knowing what you're going to be doing. But especially I find with computer science, it's really hard to know everything about it. And I've given up trying to teach just the areas where I really feel like I understand the STEM because it's too limiting now. There's so much out there that I don't really have a great grasp of. So I'm trying to figure out how to balance that a little bit because I think that's a real challenge. I like that you pointed that out, Kim.
I like another thing that he said that I thought was really thoughtful. And this would work like if you are with those kids on a regular basis. But I appreciated that he said not only does he prepare for him, but from their perspective. So I thought that was really important and knowing, and that shows that he knows his students, and that makes sense. Like if you are a guest in the classroom or somebody that comes in and out periodically, that may not be something, but if you're working with those kids, so something to instill with those that are in the trenches on a daily basis, to consider those perspectives and those things from the students that they know so well.
Imani says the same thing in chat, getting to know your students and the subjects, knowing what information they're gonna need or what questions they might have. That's really important. Anything else you notice in the videos?
I like that they brought, I forgot which facilitator it was, but brought up the fact that it's not school. So make sure that the setting is reflective of that. So, they do not need to be sitting in rows, and even sitting, just, it's a change of environment, and make sure that that comes across.
And giving students a chance to lead as you're doing that, I think that's really important too. Lamont was the one that we saw him really setting up the space and moving the tables around and thinking about how the activity and the space are going to interact together. And he had one of the pieces of cardboard and wanted to make sure that there was more than enough room so that they couldn't just use one piece of cardboard as their ramp. So I really appreciated that perspective too, to think about how can I use the space that I have, because so often, especially in after school programs, you are given a space. It is probably not the ideal space to do that type of activity. And so there is figuring out how this activity fits in this space. And I thought he did a pretty good job talking about that and what he thinks about how students can interact with each other, how they're going to interact with the facilitator, having room to move around, to work collaboratively. All of those things kind of fit into how you're going to use the space, and being comfortable, if you can, moving tables around. I don't remember if he mentioned it in this video, but in another one, sometimes he talks, oh no, I think it's a different instructor, talks about having the kids help you move the tables around. If that's part of what you need to do, maybe you have to do that with the class or the group because you may not have the time to do it all ahead of time. So when when we think about this step of getting prepared, it's thinking about your students, the group you're going to be working with, what you know about them, what information they're going to need to make sense of this activity, making sure you know an appropriate amount of information about it, or can do some research ahead of time, or and especially I think to actually do the activity, or at least read carefully through the activity so you know what's going to happen, and you can think about what are the supplies I'm going to need, how does the space need to be arranged, how much time do I need, so that because I always need to pay attention so that I don't run out of time at the end of the activity, to really keep time for the rest of the activity set aside if we can. So I think those were all good strategies to think about. What are the things you do before you even get with the students to do the activity to really make it successful? And even if you only have 15 or 20 minutes to do that, I feel like it's time well invested to spend some time preparing for the activity before you actually get in front of the group to do that. Any other strategies or solutions that you've developed in your own program that have been really useful for helping staff prepare to teach? All right, then let's move on and talk about step 4.
All right, step 4 is preparing the space. And so in the last video, we talked about Lamond. He talked a little bit about how he sets up the space, and we mentioned that. And this is really important in after school programs because of not having an ideal learning environment. For example, when you're in a cafeteria, you're limited to the tables they have in there. That kind of makes it challenging sometimes to figure out how to organize your space. And so we're going to watch another video that talks about preparing a space in more detail. And this is an example where Pete talks about how he sets up his space for learning. And I'll go ahead and put the link for this video in the chat as well.
Thank you.
I usually like to sit down before a class and make sure that I can do the thing I'm going to ask the students to do. Running through it once myself is a good way to find out if I'm overreaching for what I expect students to be able to accomplish, and helps me to tune the activity to the level that my class is ready for. I like to start with a learning target and then brainstorm activities that will help kids to define any vocabulary in the learning target, and activities that will break down exactly what that means. Because if they understand what learning is supposed to happen at the beginning, they can be focused on that goal, and it'll help framework their thinking. When I'm setting up the space, it really depends on the activity that I intend the kids to do. I like to have them move around a little bit during any given class, because that helps delineate for them when an activity has changed and when their focus should change. In group work, I like them to be face to face around the table, and I like to give plenty of space for me to walk around behind every student, ask them questions, listen to what they're saying. I love to just listen, and having space to walk around is really important for that. I think it's incredibly important to have a room that is versatile, because different setups lend themselves to different kinds of activities. During the first days of class in a traditional classroom, I really like to train the kids on how to set up for a variety of activities. And we spend time putting the desks into groups of different sizes and arranging the room so everyone can see the screen, and arranging the room so that I can get over everyone's shoulder to see what they're working on. I think if you approach the classroom as a versatile space, you have the ability to respond when a setup isn't working and you see something that could work better.
All right. So first question I have is, what did you notice in this video that may or may not be different from the previous video?
One of the things I noticed here, Pete talked about starting out with a learning objective, and Alex and Lamont didn't really mention that in the first video. I think that that's a real strength as he's talking about how he prepares to really start by thinking what is the objective? What are we trying to get to? And keep that in mind as you do the rest of you're thinking about the activity.
Well, and I will say, I noticed that he talks about, I want to make sure I can do the activity, so I have realistic expectations. That is something that I have found to be pretty significant in computer science, because you can have the expectation that they're going to be capable of doing something, but if it's not reasonable for that age level, then it becomes a lot more difficult. And so you may need to adjust the activity accordingly. So how does Pete think about preparing yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah, I
Monty,
agree because
go ahead.
setting up the classroom may be different for one activity. Like for example, if you're using code.org, you're going to set the classroom up maybe with, multiple iPads or, however that looks, or maybe you're doing it in pods or whatnot. But the way you set up and prepare the classroom is going to be different from activity to activity. Like there's some I've used on How to Smile that are, like windmills, and like you're just going to need different things, but the classroom might need to look different for each. So keeping that in mind as well, I think that's a really great point that you made in the chat. I don't
Mhm.
want to say your name wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And it does vary by activity, because if you're dealing with technology, if you have a bunch of desktop computers that you're using, you're going to have to, they don't move. So you're going to have to work within the confines of where those have been positioned. And I've been in classrooms, formal ed classrooms, where they have them all against the walls. So all the students' backs are to you, but you can see all their computer screens, because it's important to be able to see their computer screens to help them. And so, but their backs are to you for that reason. So I definitely think that is something to consider, and it becomes even more important with technology, because you've got to decide which is more important. Is it more important to see their screen to help them, or is it more important to see their faces? Because sometimes you don't get both. All right, and the last question I have is, one of the things that I noticed is that Pete's not just thinking about learning, he's also thinking about positive youth development, which is a really important concept in 4-H. And Lamont talked about empowering learners as well. And I know that was mentioned in the chat earlier too, as something that was interesting. So how do these leaders engage youth in preparing for learning? And Maria said checking the websites before is a really helpful idea, because LPS does block a lot of websites that you think you can get to, you cannot get to because of their firewalls. So checking and making sure you can even access those is really helpful as well.
I think that both Pete and Lamont talked about giving over some of their authority to students, having students take a leadership role in what is happening. And I also feel like when that's done well, that really helps kind of differentiate after school and school. That like in the classroom, a lot of the dynamics, depending on the teacher, of course, but a lot of it is students talking to teacher talking to students, but not as much students talking to one another. And having student assistants that are helping pass things out, having groups that are collaborating together. I think that those things really help make a different feel about the after school learning environment. Helping older students It's a good way to engage those older students too in your after school program. Pete also talked about moving and I thought about that, and as you were talking about that sort of traditional technology classroom where everybody is facing their screens and their back is to the center of the room, that sometimes that leaves some space where you could have everybody get up and move and sit on the floor in the center of the room, or bring their chairs around for a huddle sort of discussion, and moving them away from like, if you want to actually have students talk and pay attention to what you're doing, moving away from the screens for that talking can be really helpful. So I think that idea of moving within your space and moving students within the space is really good to remember as well.
I agree with that. And I think Pete touched on this, or Lalonde, I don't remember which one. When they're doing engineering activities, there's a lot of group work with engineering activities. It's one of the practices for an engineering mindset is teamwork. And so you do a lot of group activities with engineering. With computer science, there's not as many group activities unless you have to share technology resources. And so it's ideal for every student to be able to have their computer if they're coding. And so if you can, you try and do that. And so the room is arranged differently just on the basis that you're not necessarily having them working in groups. But I know I've had some of the educators that I've worked with, they said they would have a student that was just really proficient at a particular coding language. And he would never get his project done because he went around and he helped other people because he just loved the troubleshooting aspect of it. And they found value in that for him because he just went around and helping other people, but that was what he was really good at and what he enjoyed, even though he didn't have a project at the end of it. And I think that's one of the freedoms that we have in informal education. You can allow them to work to their strengths like that. He doesn't have to produce a product. And so that's another thing that you can think about when you're preparing your space. Do you want them working in groups, or can they just be around each other, or have a collaborative space to come to and then go back and work on their computers some more? All right, so those are the 4 steps for preparing yourself to lead activities. And so Sandra is going to now give some application for this.
So we kind of described the 4 steps, and I think I hope the videos helped you see what those steps look like in practice. But what we're going to do next is actually pull up the Makey piano activity. So if you have that handy, get that out either on your screen or in front of you, and we're going to go through these 4 steps using that activity. Well, I guess we don't have to do much for step 1 because we've already got the activity, but we'll go through steps 2, 3, and 4 with the Makey piano activity. So the first thing is to pull up the activity, pull up the checklist, and then we're going to apply the checklist there. I do, and then we'll come back together in a couple minutes to talk about what you saw on the checklist. We don't expect that every activity covers all the points on this checklist, and we also don't expect that all of them are equally important to you in your program. But what we want to do is to use the checklist to identify if there's things you can do to improve the activity to make it better meet the needs of your students that you're going to be teaching. So when you're using the checklist, think specifically if you have your own class or group like Maria does, when you're thinking about, for example, the last one is including students with disabilities. Think about the specific needs of the students in your program. And even if they're not identified disabilities, but you know that your students have been sitting all day and they need a chance to move and be active and physical. Does this activity meet that need? And so we want you to look through the checklist, apply it to the Makey activity, and come back with your concerns, areas you would improve, things you might add to the activity or took away from the activity to make it better meet the needs of your students. So think about what you would do if you were teaching this activity. And I suppose before we totally break for a moment to work on your own, are people familiar with Makey Makey? Do I need to do a little bit of an explanation of what Makey Makey is before we go into the checklist? Can you raise your hand if you'd like me to talk about what Makey Makey is? Okay. Let me
Yeah, Kim said
just do a brief overview here. Makey Makey is a technology kit. This is what comes in a basic Makey Makey kit. You're gonna get the Makey Makey board, which is in the center, and it's a circuit board. And you can connect to that board using the alligator clips. And the USB cable connects the circuit board to your computer. So students, each group is going to need a Makey Makey kit and a computer with a USB cable to connect it to. Kim mentioned Scratch earlier. You can use Makey Makey with Scratch. We'll see a video of students doing that a little bit later, but you can also use it very tactilely too. You can connect different things to those alligator clips, and anything that can complete the circuit that electricity can flow through can be used with a Makey Makey to make it work. So one of my favorites is the Makey Makey piano made with bananas as a way to complete that circuit. So that is a little bit of an overview of what Makey Makey is. We will see it in action next. We've got a video of some kids using a Makey Makey, but this is an activity basically where students are using that Makey Makey kit to create their own controller. What they end up with is something that focuses that acts pretty much like a video game controller. And they can use that to interact with the computer in simple ways. Okay, so let's take about 5 minutes, and if you get finished before that and want us to come back together, let us know in the chat, but I'm actually gonna set a timer for 5 minutes so that we give you time to look at that activity and to look at the checklist. on my version of the PDF, I'm having trouble linking to the full description of the activity, so I just put that link in the chat. There is more information if you go to the Makey Makey website that has instructions on how to set that up. So that is in the chat if you want to look at that. All right, are we ready to come back together? So, do I have a volunteer that wants to share? What did you think of the activity? What would you do to enhance it or improve it? Because we do think that it needs improvement. It's not meant to be a great example.
One thing, I think that this activity does a good job of like reflecting, but one thing that it doesn't really touch on is the planning. Like instead of just like doing it, like how are you going to do it? What does that process look like? Like a lot of times when I'm doing activities really focus on like, you know, the brainstorming and the trial and error and those types of things, and I don't really see that in here. It just says like, can you figure out, okay, well, yeah, like how are we going to figure it out? You know, having that intentional brainstorming time, whether that's, you know, alone first and then with a group, or, you know, just allowing ideas to be shared and making time for that process.
I think that's a great noticing to point out, Courtney. And especially I feel like with this activity and with a lot of computer science activities, that may not actually happen right at the beginning, because students may need a little bit of experience before they're even ready to get into planning and figuring it out. So one of the things I like here is it has that activity where you're going to figure out how to complete a simple circuit. It doesn't really explain how to do that in the lesson plan, but if you go to that online link, step 4 is to try to create a circuit that connects to the space bar. And what you do is they set up the makey, and it does have the step-by-step of how to set up the makey, and you hold on to the clip, and then you complete the circuit by, you've got one clip that's grounded and you grab the other clip that is connected to the space bar. When you complete that circuit, it adds a space on your screen so that you can see that it's doing that. Well, then what happens if you add an extra person into that circuit? And it gives students a sense of what they can do a little bit with the makey in a pretty prescribed way. And they can figure out, can we have 2 or 3 people in that circuit? Does it not work when I have 6 people in the circuit? They can start understanding, because one of the basic things they have to understand is makey is all about completing circuits. And if your circuit doesn't complete, the makey doesn't do what you want it to. So I love the idea of giving them some hands-on experience, but then stopping and taking time to think and plan before you move on. That's a really good addition to the activity. Anything else? I think this activity exemplifies a lot of the challenges around doing computer science and after school, and figuring out what supplies you have to have, managing that, and figuring out the technology piece. There's a lot of challenges in here that, if you've never opened up a makey kit and you try to sit down with a group of students for the first time without having done that preparation, you're going to run into some challenges. So let's move on to the next slide. I think, Anne, this one's back to you.
Yes, so when we were talking earlier about step 3, which is preparing yourself. So referring back to this activity again, if you were going to teach this with a group of students, or you were going to teach staff to teach this with a group of students, what would it look like if everything goes smoothly?
Well, you'd have a happy room.
Yeah.
Because it worked. There were no problems. Everyone felt accomplished. Yeah, you're going to see smiles, but it rarely goes smoothly.
I agree with that. And especially when you're using a new technology that you're introducing students to, and the staff are trying to figure it out, sometimes it does not go as smoothly as you hope. So I think that is a very nice ideal standard. So the next question then is, what might cause problems during this activity? And as we already pointed out earlier, I'll just start out with circuits are actually more confusing than people sometimes think they are. You can't actually hook them up in any order. You have to have positives and negatives in the correct order. And LEDs have a short, they have 2 little wires that stick out of them. One's short that's negative, the bigger one, longer one is positive. You have to know which order to put them in so that they complete your circuit. So that's one problem that is really easy that would arise in any type of activity that you're doing circuitry with. So what other problems might arise during this activity? And how can you manage them? Either with preparation, or how are you going to deal with them in the moment?
It could be that, the wires are no good. Maybe there's a crack in it and you can't see that. So that might be an issue that you can't, I think whenever there's an issue, I introduce troubleshooting to the students. So I remind them about troubleshooting, switching out, looking a little bit deeper than what they see. So that could be an issue.
I think that is a very good point. And alligator clips do eventually fail. When you have used them enough, the wires do become loose and they do not function correctly anymore. And so sometimes it's just telling them, okay, having an extra set of wires. And if one's not working, say, okay, try a different wire, and they can figure that out. And then you can get rid of the one that's not working anymore. What else can you think of that might be a problem during this? Because you are also adding the element of coding into this through Scratch as well. So you have the technology of the Makey and the computer that you're trying to integrate and put together, which can also sometimes be problematic. And we already talked about if your school district doesn't allow you to get onto a site, and that was the whole site that you were going to do all the coding on for that day, that's obviously a problem that can arise. And so knowing that you can get on is also helpful. Knowing that you have the technology that will integrate with each other correctly. The Makey is a pretty safe type of technology because all you need is a USB. And if you just have a USB plug-in in your computer, your laptop, whatever you've got, you can get this one plugged in. But there are some boards that are a little more complicated and you have to have certain software. 3D printers obviously can add complexity to it. And so knowing how to get your technology integrated is another thing that you want to make sure you have figured out. What else?
I was gonna add maybe Wi-Fi. There was a time, I think right around COVID, when all the Wi-Fi was down from Canada to the eastern coast. And so no one could access anything for some time. It was like a blackout or something. So that's an issue that could occur.
That's absolutely.
And I think,
go ahead, Courtney.
To add to that, sometimes for one reason that we have no idea why, somebody's device may work and somebody else's may not. So like to realize that the Wi-Fi may be fine, it's the certain device. If you're working with, X amount of tablets or X amount of iPads or Chromebooks or, from Mac to HP, whatever it may be, somebody's all of a sudden may exit out for no reason. And so just maybe to have like additional hands on deck, because if you're working with students that need guidance and assistance with that, you're going to need more than just your hands probably. So to plan for that thoughtfully.
Yeah, and somebody said in chat, be sure to test equipment. That is a really good rule of thumb. And make sure you have your software downloaded onto all your machines, because we would periodically think we had it all and we would miss one. So then when you wanted to use it, you didn't have Scratch loaded on. That was a software program, you didn't have it loaded on, then you were out one tablet. And so then you had to rearrange your groups if you had the exact number of tablets. So those are all things that you have to start thinking through and add that to what can be uncomfortable for your staff or you into the after school program, because you have to now have all this stuff working. And we're going to talk a little bit later about having a backup plan. So if your technology fails or your internet goes down, in Nebraska, there are still places where internet is very sketchy. And so some days you have it and some days you don't. And so you always have to have a backup plan for those types of locations in some of the really rural areas of the country as well. So go ahead.
Okay.
Any comments?
No, I was going to add too, because I had this issue happen, but sometimes there's a student in the class that knows how to use everything, that knows everything. So you're trying to figure out, we don't think of this as, an issue, but it is. So what I tend to do is have them become an instructor, like go teach the other students to do what they or sometimes get a more challenging activity for that student to do to kind of keep them going.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's really related to knowing your students and meeting their needs.
yeah, I think that's a good point as well. And so for the last part of this is that we do have a third video that we wanted to watch that Sandra mentioned earlier that is actually using the Makey Makeys. So these kids are from a girls and boys club, and they've already had the Makey Makey kits introduced to them. And so now they're trying to do a major project that they can share with other kids at their sites. And so I'm going to put a couple of questions for you just to think about in the chat, and I will also put the video link in, and then Sandra will go ahead and play the video.
Okay, what I want you to do now is take about 5 minutes and we're going to talk about what we want our interactive room to look like. And I'm going to give each group a piece of paper and a pencil, and you're going to draw what kind of project you want. What I encourage you to do is look around the room and find things that could work in your Makey Makey and try them out and see. Okay?
Youth are challenged to create a device that will complete a task. They then prepare to display their designs to others. Using a Makey Makey device, youth work together on a project. Watch as frontline staff give youth a choice in what they're creating, provide support, but also let the youth do the work. Listen as staff get youth to explain their projects. Pay special attention to the body language of the facilitator, the space given to the youth, and the materials needed to successfully complete the challenge.
Let's brainstorm. So what kind of big thing do you want to make for other kids to come in and try out so they can see what you made with the Makey Makey?
A giant boat.
A boat? Okay. Team, how do you feel about a giant boat?
That sounds good.
So we connected the circuit, not the circuits, these to the circuit board, which controls the arrows in space, so we can control the computer.
But you have to be holding the ground wire because that is what helps it power, because that's what lights the circuit. I'm going to see if this is going to work.
So what are you planning to do?
We're going to connect it to the Play-Doh and like make it like move, make the scratch move and like create sounds.
So why are you guys using Scratch? Why did you decide to use that program?
Because it has computer programming and it helps you program the buttons to make sounds.
What are you going to do with those sounds?
If you press like a button,
you
like
can
that.
press like an arrow button, you can make a sound.
You made it too. You made it too flat. You made us too flat. Wait.
So how do you fix that?
You make it taller.
Okay. Is that one connected?
No.
All right.
I can't jump.
So you gotta fix it.
So connected.
So, can you explain to us how does this work? So, how do you make the wires make sound?
Because it's metal and you gotta connect it to this makey thing. There's different arrows and like, okay, so white is over here and you would hold that and it would like, it shows the down arrow because white is going down. Go.
Okay.
Jump, jump. Going, dude, going.
We are the human controller and it's actually working.
There's different arrows and like.
All right, so what did you notice in this video?
Each group really had a different idea and a different approach to the problem or the challenge, I guess.
Yes, and I think you see that a lot in engineering type activities, and you can also see it a lot in CS activities because they give them a lot of freedom in this activity. They could apparently even choose whether they were doing Scratch or whether they were doing a different coding program. So, because this was a culminating activity, so that was interesting.
One of the things that kind of have to watch closely to notice, but what their ideas are change from the beginning of the video to the end. That their final, they're very excited at the end. It is working and it's doing what they wanted it to, but it was not necessarily straightforward to get from where they started at to where they finished. So there was a lot of re-engineering and trying something else that is inherent to this activity that I think is really great for kids to have an opportunity to have things not work and have to figure it out and work through it.
And the other question I'll ask you is, did you see any computer science being done?
Yes. They were all on the computer. Everything was computer science. You know, it's a combination of, I guess, electrical engineering and computer science.
Yes, and some people think, well, if you're making a circuit, that's not part of computer science, but computers are made out of electrical circuits. So that is part of computer science as well. It's not only working on computers. I think that it's broader than that. And so you can do what we call unplugged activities where you're not working with a computer at all, but you're still learning computational thinking, or you're still learning computer science concepts, like binary coding and all kinds of other things. And so just because you are not in front of a computer doesn't mean that you're not doing computer science. All right, so I think we are ready to move on to step 4, Sandra.
Okay. And step 4 was thinking about the space and how you're using the space. And I think that this is a activity that can be challenging for that. So I think actually before we talk about setting up the space for this activity, I'm going to go back and share a portion of the video again. And this time I'm going to turn the sound off and just have you notice the space and how they're using the space. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong thing. Pay attention to that rather than to what is happening in the video this time through, okay? So in that sort of short, just a few seconds of video, what different spaces did you see them using in the room?
Yeah, actually, I noticed that in the first video that they were all over the room. It was in just one place. And then I think another thing to point out is that it wasn't teacher centered, right? The teacher was kind of right in there with them, kind of doing the work. So it made it more of a team effort versus I'm going to tell you what to do and you're just going to follow my instructions.
So there were a lot of different groups working in different spaces. One of the things that I noticed, because I've watched this a lot now, is this group seems very different from one of the other groups. So this group seems to be the youngest kids in the group, and they're sitting around a table with a facilitator sitting right there with them. And Nancy's talking through, she's doing a lot of the mediating with the group, really helping guide them in how to work together and how to collaborate. But this other group, let's see if we get to the other group, is a group of older students, and they don't seem to have anybody working with them. And it starts out these two, just the two of them working together. And then a little bit later, there, here. Now there's three of them working together. So, but this group, we don't see a lot of direct interaction with the facilitator. There's more of them working on their own. And then the facilitator comes in and talks with them about what they're doing. But that's just very different dynamics. And you can still see behind them in the corner here that younger group of students that has a facilitator working directly with them. I thought that was a really powerful thing about how the activity was set up and how the space was set up, that the older group was given a little bit more freedom to work on their own and find their own space or their own way to tackle this. And their ideas changed over time. The group changed over time, but the younger group was much more mediated with an adult working one-on-one with them because they needed more help. And I thought that's really a great insight in how this activity was set up. Anything else that people noticed about how the space was used? Let's look at one more segment here, and I'll let you talk about what you see here. This was another part that was like, wow, never thought of that.
It's muted, Sandra.
Yeah, I just want you to look at the space.
Okay.
So how is this group different?
I guess I never would have thought of putting it on the wall. Like, that's just so insightful. I thought that like the first time I was like, and I thought it's funny when the kid put his head against the wall, but that is, I mean, like normally we think of like table, floor, you know, I wouldn't think of the wall. That's creative.
Yeah, I thought that was a really creative use of their space. And again, this is another group kind of doing something a little bit different. But I was really impressed with how they were using all of their spaces available in creative ways here.
All right, are you ready to move on?
What do you think, guys? You feel like we've covered this?
All right. So then the next slide is talking about rainy day plans. And so no matter how hard you set everything up, you plan, you check your equipment, sometimes things just don't go well or an activity just fails for whatever reason. And so having a rainy day plan is a very good idea. And Sandra is going to talk about one example of a rainy day plan that she used to have.
I'm gonna skip that actually because we're kind of short on time, but I do want to one of the things that somebody mentioned earlier is your rainy day plan for CS, maybe the Wi-Fi is going down or your technology is not working. So that's another reason to really have a good rainy day plan when you're planning computer science.
And so one of the recommendations that we have for a rainy day plan is called binary bracelets. And this is something that you can just have sitting on the shelf. It doesn't take very many supplies. You can see it's just beads and some twine. So you can have it sitting on the shelf ready to go whenever you need it and just pull it off and use it when you want to. And there, I'll put a code or a link in the chat to the whole activity. This is an example of one of the pages of it. And it always helps with classroom management to have that backup plan that you can just go to. And this is basically talking about how do you start thinking about coding. So it kind of fits with a lot of different activities.
One of the things I like about this is it's something you can come back to, because you can always have them create a different code. You can have them code their name, but another day you can have them code a message that then they give the bracelet to somebody else and challenge them to figure out what does that bracelet say. So I think there's a lot of ways you can use it. You can use it more than once. But as Anne said, the key here is if things are not working, especially if you're having technology problems, rather than keep butting your head against the problem that isn't working, it just makes it so much easier if you have a plan B that you can jump to fairly easily to do something that doesn't require the technology, doesn't require a lot of space. If you're suddenly bumped out of the library that you thought you were going to have available and you have to move it to a different space, having activities like this is really important, I think. And we wanted to wrap up today with a little bit of brainstorming about what you heard today. And well, actually, before we brainstorm about what you're going to take away, you can use that QR code to go to the survey to give us some feedback on how the workshop went for you. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about, we mentioned at the beginning, is it's really nice to have this really clear process of how to prepare for an activity, to find the activity, to assess it, to think about it ahead of time and prepare yourself and prepare your space. But that doesn't always work for after school programs. And I would really love some feedback from you. Is this consistent with what you're doing? Would this work for you? What is the reality of this sort of process for your programs that you work with? Can you do this?
I mean, honestly, I think that it's a great tool, and I think that it's a great guidance for, I don't know about other programs, but a lot of ours don't have teachers, they're parents, they're people that don't prepare lesson plans or have the background to do that. So to have something that is like protocol or framework worthy that isn't as specific as a lesson plan, I think is a really great tool for them to utilize when thinking of a lesson or activity.
Mhm. We realize that a lot of times you're starting with somebody else's lesson. So how do you familiarize yourself with that? Figure out what's actually going to happen when you try to do it is really important. Any other?
Yeah, I agree, because a lot of times we just print off things and we just go. But if we read through it and take a look at these 4 criteria, then if you just reflect on that for a few minutes, you can realize what works and what doesn't. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, this is your time, not mine. One of the suggestions that I have for programs, because it is really hard to figure out time for planning, is to think about how you can fit it into your day. Because you mentioned, Courtney, having a lot of parents, and we see that a lot in after school programs We've got people who are working as pairs in the classroom all day that come into the after school, so they don't really have a break to plan and prepare. But if there's a way that you can give whoever's going to be doing the complicated lesson a half hour while somebody else is supervising students arriving in the program, maybe having a little open time in a gym to get some movement in and a snack, and give the person who's going to be leading the next activity that 30 minutes to prepare, to have a chance to organize themselves and look through the activity. That can be huge in terms of how successful the activity is. So I really think that finding time, figuring out how to build time for people to prepare, or maybe it's an extra half hour at the end of the day when there's less kids and most of them have gone home, to give a couple of people some time at the end of the day to prepare for what they're going to do the next day, to be getting ready, to have time to look through, to think about how that activity is going to work, what they need to do to build, how they need to arrange the space. All of those things are going to be really important, I feel like, to the success of the programming that you're offering to kids. So we want to thank you for joining us today. We are out of our time. So what I want to finish with is to invite you to our next workshop. It is not yet posted on the website, but the registration link is here in the chat. Our next opportunity is going to be February 14th, and we're going to be focusing on building strong teen leaders and using teens as teachers in out-of-school time programming. We have some resources for that. We have some ideas, some strategies that people here in Nebraska and nationally are trying out. I don't know that we have the answers as much as, here we had a very concrete 4-step process. Try this and implement it in your program. Building strong teen leaders, we're going to be much more collaborative. We're going to be learning from each other, because this is something that's new. We do have resources to support you in this that we'll be sharing, but we also want to hear what people are trying, because I hear a lot of programs experimenting with teens as volunteers or as paid staff in their programming. And I think it's really crucial. We just want to hear where you're going with that and what your needs are so we can support you. Again, thanks for joining us. We invite you to give us some feedback on that survey. And let me find the link if you want to just go online and do the survey. Here's a link you can click on as well. We would love to get your feedback on how this went and what you'd like to see in the future. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great day, everyone. Any questions or any concerns before we chat? Maria, I do want to say it was really great to have you join us. It was nice to have somebody else from Lincoln in the webinar today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I have like calls, I'm in my office, so I couldn't participate a lot, but I hear everything. It was awesome. How should I download the chat?
Oh, yes. We can explain that to you. So there should be, here, let me stop the recording first.